Well, everybody, we're in for a real treat today. We have Steve and Gretel Adams from Sunny Meadows Flower Farms on the Flower Podcast. Welcome, y'all.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Well, I have to admit, it's kind of like I think I followed you on Instagram for quite a while, but I really, how sometimes you follow people, but then they don't ever show up in your feed. And so it kind of fell below the radar. And in the last 6 months, it's like everywhere I turn, I hear about Gretel and Steve and Gretel. Gretel writes for this. They got this class. I mean, I've been hearing all kinds of things, and I think it's just the right time to sit down and talk about what you guys are doing. I'm really excited about that. So I always have to start at the beginning. Why flowers? How did you get into flower farming?
Well, yeah, thanks for having us. We're excited to be here too. We always kind of say farming found us. So I was a social worker. Steve worked at a coffee shop where we met a farmer that we worked for the first year. And the deal was he only did Saturday farmers markets. So we would harvest and do a weekday market, and then we made the first $50, and then we split everything else with him. So that's how we got paid to like work on the farm first year.
And we would sell sunflowers, cosmos, and zinnias.
Yeah, pretty much just like planted from just like cheap wild seed, and it was just sort of our way to get our foot in the door, but we fell in love with it. So after the first year, I quit my full-time job and would substitute teach in the winter to kind of like help fuel the business. So yeah, we fell in love with it pretty quick, just like spreading the joy of flowers. So we started with flowers. Like the guy that we worked for, Steve Anderson at Anderson Orchards, he was a flower farmer when we worked for him, but he had an orchard and did pumpkins and strawberries and vegetables, and had kind of landed on flowers like being his thing. So that's kind of where we started with flowers. And then our goal was to live off of the land. So we had like homestead vibe. I made soap, and we had pigs and ducks and chickens and a CSA, and we grew vegetables. And yeah, that just every year, like we focused more and more on the flowers and dropped those other enterprises. I think it was like year 5 we got employees, and year 7 I think it was when we quit growing veggies completely and went to 100% flowers. So we'd always set ourselves up. We were Sunny Meadows Flower Farm from the beginning. We used to do salad greens like Elliott Coleman style in the winter.
Sure.
And so when we would call restaurants, it's like, oh, you have like spinach and tomatoes. I don't know, it just people weren't. We were the sunflower kids at market. So when we started, like Steve said, we would just take sunflowers and zinnias mostly. So when we were at the Granville Farmers Market in the beginning, it was like we could sell like 13 buckets of sunflowers because that's like all we had.
And I was 24 and she was 21. So, I mean, we were pretty young, and I think people really just like seeing the young people sell flowers, and that just quickly became our niche. For the CSA for us became, because our focus was on flowers, the CSA became, we joked about it being our high interest loan. Like we would get this money from our customers in the spring, and then it would just be a struggle to keep up with harvesting the stuff for them because we were selling flowers 4 other days a week. And so it's hard to transition between flowers and veggies and flowers and veggies. So year 7, we decided just focus on one thing, one enterprise selling flowers. And so that became our focus pretty quickly.
And now it's been 15 years. Yeah, we started in 2006. So now we've been growing 100% flowers for longer than we were growing veggies and stuff,
Yeah. I still have a tug.
Yeah, like every year he's like, should we plant some, should we
potatoes?
Plant some carrots, or should we plant some potatoes? Like we do Dahlia tubers, so we have a potato digger, and he's like, oh, should we do some potatoes, or should we plant some garlic? And
I like digging.
Think about when we're gonna have time to harvest that stuff when it's flower time. That was the issue.
I like digging plants. However, you just bought a bunch of garlic for me to plant, so I don't.
Well, that's just for us personally, though. That's not like for.
There's flowers. You can always harvest the flowers.
We'll plant those. We'll plant that garlic when we plant the tulips because the garlic cloves fit through the little tulip planters.
We're not afraid to use garlic scapes in a bouquet.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is
Yeah.
we also have fruit trees that we'll use the like Asian pears, we'll use just the foliage of the Asian pear, or we'll sell with small little Asian pears on it.
So we have some stuff that remains from our
blueberries,
like produce days,
Yeah.
but it's mainly just for us to cut now. Yeah, so now it's mainly florists florists are our biggest sales outlet. And we quit this year doing the farmers market, and last year, COVID times, we quit going to the farmers market. And we also quit selling to wholesalers. So our objective is to be the wholesaler, I guess. I don't know. We've been bringing stuff in from Charles Little and some of our other grower friends, Star Valley, yeah, to like have their stuff in our coolers for our florists to buy as well. And so that's been really fun to like help support our other flower farmer friends while also giving our florists access to more like domestically grown stuff. So
so the wholesale houses we decided to cut out this year because locally we were having issues. They just weren't as supportive as we kind of hoped or felt that they should be locally. And I think it's because somewhat of a competition thing. I don't know. We had a good relationship with a couple wholesalers in Cleveland. But after last year,
when they shut down, we needed to find some place to sell the stuff we would have usually been selling to them. So we started shipping retail flowers because we were already set up shipping to florists. And so, by the time they came back on and like they weren't really buying from us anyways. And then this year the shortages hit and they were kind of like, hey, when are you coming back? And we were like, how we had to pivot, and we like restructured our business to like sell these flowers other places, and we can only produce so much. So so they got the cut this year. But so we still have a farm stand on the farm, and we do grocery bouquets and bunches. We have I think 11 stores that we do direct store delivery, and then we have a grocery distribution center in Cleveland, which is about 2.5 hours away. And they take, during the heat of the summer this year, they were taking 2 truckloads a week. So like box truckloads, so like 180 buckets of flowers, because they've got like 20 stores up there. So Heinen's they can work through a lot of flowers. So so that's mainly what we're doing is grocery and florist and the farm stand. But we do have some shipping retail. We did a retail home delivery subscription, and that was something else that came out of COVID, was us doing a home delivery service. We would have a holiday open house, and so we started with Christmas wreaths, and our delivery driver likes doing home deliveries. So we were like, if you're in, then we'll like set up a subscription service, and like get you some deliveries. So, and that's worked out really well.
So, and then, I mean, not to keep going on about this, but we ended up having to hire a second delivery driver this year because our main driver had a little bit of back issues. And then we hired somebody else, and then we just picked up more deliveries to kind of keep our second driver busy at that point. So the home deliveries aren't our favorite thing to do, but the common thing that you hear us talk about is keeping our crew, giving our crew access to year-round full-time employment. And so if that means that we have to do more home deliveries so we can keep this driver busy, who is really valuable 2 days a week for our wholesale deliveries, but we can give them 3 or 4 days with home deliveries, then that's something we'll do.
Well, I've learned a lot in this short period of time about you guys, and I probably have about 100 questions that I'm like, you just gloss over these things, like, and that's fine. I've got to ask some questions. So you've started having employees on year 5, you said, and then you ramped up by year 7.
Yeah.
And so okay, so one question that I know I get sometimes, and I've asked before, but I'm always interested on how other people view these things. How did you know when it was time, when you just, because some people feel like it's hard, it's financially, it's like they're nervous about making that commitment.
Yeah. I
So
would say if you have any like inkling that you think you might need an employee, you probably already did for a while. Like that's, I mean, we worked, we were out there with the headlamps harvested at 9 p.m. like for market, making bouquets all night. Like we did all that, and so I think what happened was we advertised on ATRA, which is like a sustainable farming place you can advertise for internships. And so we had a couple reach out to us and they were like, wow, we want to work for you, but he needs to be full-time and we need to be like regular employees because we're going to want to buy a house, and like we can't get paid cash under the table. And so it was really Nate and Amanda that like nudged us to like have, get the EIN and like do the whole thing. But I feel like for us, then you're having full-time somebody there means you have to be organized enough to be able to fulfill their whole time. I mean, it's a game changer. I mean, for me right now, I mean, for us, what we're mainly doing is, facilitating the team accomplishing the tasks, which feels really different than like accomplishing the task yourself. But I kind of see myself as like the orchestrator is what I say. So I like make people's list in the morning and then like make sure they have the resources to be able to get it done. I'm not the one out in the field harvesting, and like that's really hard for some people to let go. And there's definitely times when I'm like, I just need to be out of the office because flowers need me. And I'm like, I'll be in the barn for a little bit because like I want to be touching flowers. And that's, what I'm here for. I mean, Steve's still out in the field doing some bed prep and stuff. So,
But to answer your question, how do you know? I think that is hands down the biggest decision you can make as a business owner is that first step to hire somebody. I think that's the biggest decision you can make. Now you're going to make decisions that influence your business, but that's going to change your business. And so I don't think you ever really know until you do it, and then you figure out how to utilize those assets to generate more revenue. And I think for us it was hard. Like, what are they going to do the whole time? Like we need to hire another office lady. We're like, well, what are they going to do in the winter? And so again, we pick up these enterprises or these enterprises basically that are winter driven, and so we do that so that we can sustain employees year round. But I think, like Gretel said, if you think you're ready for it, then you probably were ready for it. But the hardest thing is just making that jump and filling their time and being a good boss. I mean,
and figuring out, for me it was like thinking like, how is someone else going to know what's going on in my head? And so it's like figuring out the systems of how you like communicate that with people, I feel like is the biggest step.
And it gets easier, but it never gets easy. I mean,
it becomes more routine. I would say that I don't feel like it's easy still.
No, it's
some days it flows really well and you're like, yeah, like I did that. But there's a lot of days, like today was one of them, where it was just there's a lot of moving parts. Right now we're in the like part of the shoulder months where we're not just harvesting and processing every day. Like in the summer, it's from Mother's Day through frost. Typically it's like harvest every day and then process in the afternoon, or his field crew would do field crew stuff in the afternoon. But now we're not harvesting every day. We're not selling to the grocery distribution center because they typically only go through September. And so October is when it starts like project time. And so that's a lot more like running around and kind of managing different teams. If somebody's harvesting seeds to save and someone else is tagging dahlias to get ready for tuber digging, and my other team is like harvesting and fulfilling florist orders, and the sales like people are, so it's like then there's even more kind of like things happening at the same time.
And for whatever reason, it's weird for me, my personally slowest season is end of August, September, and the first week of October. And it, you know,
Well, you
because
come in and help in the barn with sales and stuff,
yeah,
processing. But as far as
I'm
field
helping
prep,
out.
yeah.
I'm helping out, but now we're on to digging dahlias, and so that's 100% of my focus, 100% of the time, you know. And so now I'm kind of back into my busy time. Springtime, I'm very busy.
Wintertime, you're steaming greenhouse
Yes.
prep and stuff. Yeah.
So
So
my
we kind of have split it.
yeah,
Yeah, split it up. But yeah, go ahead, finish.
that's
It goes in cycles.
yeah, it goes in cycles. So I'm kind of at the beginning of my busy season, and so a lot of my buddies will be like, "Oh, you're probably slowing down. You want to hang out?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do want to hang out, but I'm not
It's
slowing
not-
down.
it's not
I'm
happening
not
yet.
slowing down."
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well,
but the business has kind of split up in a way where it's like, and it just has naturally come in this way where he's kind of like from seed to, you know, harvestable product. So that's like weeding, bed prep, planting, seeding, cultivating, all of the things that go into like turning my crop plan into like a harvestable flower. And then I'm everything from harvest to like out the door. So that's like design, sales, like harvest list for the team, processing in the barn, everything.
With the
like that.
little crossover.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, we're obviously both a part of all of them, but that just
Right.
is kind of how we figured out how to sort of divide the team. Yeah.
So you said you had a lot more questions,
Yeah,
and we just
sorry.
talked for another 15
No,
minutes.
it's really it's wonderful actually. It's a great problem, and it's not a problem at all. But okay, so you've described a lot of kind of where you sell your product, and I kind of want to get into what does your business look like for people who haven't seen or don't know who you are, because I know that where it started and where it is now is a very different situation. One of the things I at some point want to work in is obviously you grow under plastic. You have tunnels, and you have high tunnels, and you have like connected greenhouse structures and things like that. That's a whole nother level of when do you make that jump. And I know we got a couple questions from some listeners that fall in line with everything. I just am curious, maybe can we step back and kind of see where you are now, like percentage wise, how, for people who don't know, how much of your business is undercover versus not, and how did that transition look like? And I mean,
Yeah.
that's a big can of worms, and I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
So I mean, look, year
So the home farm is
Well,
10 acres. We'll just start.
home farm 10 acres. Year 5, we put our 5th year, we put up two high tunnels, 32 by 96 foot high tunnels. And so now our home farm has become all high tunnels or greenhouses, mostly greenhouses at this point. And then our tulip production is at the home farm with a little bit of perennials mixed in, herbaceous perennials.
Yeah, like hydrangea patch. But the home farm's also where the processing barn is, and now like the office shop barn. So like I'd say undercover, there's like what, an acre of production, I think is what the total somewhere
Just
around
over,
there.
yeah.
Are you
Somewhere
on
around
two
there.
properties?
There's
So yeah, so we have
Okay.
three.
yeah,
That's
so we have so being in the city, that's part of, we're in Columbus, Ohio. So like where we are, my dad purchased this land in the 80s and the city grew around us. So like so yeah, going back, there was no like infrastructure here. My grandfather just like mowed the field. So I knew, yeah, kind of, yeah, there was a lot to take care of when we took over, but a lot of bonfires to reclaim that land. But so I always knew that it was like coming to me and the family. I always thought I'd rent it out to a nursery or something like that. But so now the home farm, the goal is
she's renting it to me.
the goal was greenhouses and perennials are the permanent things on the home farm. And then on the rented land that we have, that's where all the summer annuals are. So
in Dahlias.
So the home farm, we've got 17 greenhouses, half of which are heated. Some of them are
More than half now.
where the stats are changing because we just put up
Right.
a three bay structure, and we had to like renumber all of the houses because you start with one and then you put up a second one. It's like that just didn't make sense. So it's hard to know what the stats are, but so there's 17 total, and I would say about half of them are heated. And then we have a plot that's about 10 minutes down the road. That's 20 acres, and that's where all the field production is. But we're also, I mean, the goal was for that to be summer annuals, but right now we also just planted a lot of peonies and willows, and there's herbaceous perennial stuff over there too that's kind of taking over. So but the summer annual field, it's about half annuals, and I think we had like 3 acres of dahlias this year. So
Wow.
most of our field production is over at the other farm, and then we're currently in the process of taking over another piece of land that's another 15 minutes away, and that is our retirement plan. So we are planting all woody shrubs that will take 5 years before they produce, but then the goal is then they will produce for a lifetime afterwards. So with the end game being for us, like not doing summer annuals and having greenhouses and perennial like woody shrubs
and dahlias.
Yeah.
So kind of just at some point we want to get rid of the bouquet part of our business, but it's really valuable right now.
Yeah.
But at some point that labor, it's a lot.
And sunflowers. I mean, sunflowers, they're cheap to produce, but they're heavy, and they're just like hard to move around. And at some point in our lives, we're gonna not want to be lugging those sunflower buckets around. So we're just trying to prepare ourselves for that.
Crazy. Yeah, I'll have to share with you a sunflower story later, because I was amazed. We dealt with a local grower that sold so many sunflowers, and I mean, it's hard on the back at some point. It's one thing if you're doing 10 buckets a week or something, but when you start getting into dozens and dozens and dozens, and sunflowers are just so popular. I mean, it's such a popular flower. It's just, to me, it's unimaginable that people don't grow them, and especially now there's so many varieties. Crazy. Well, okay, so one of the questions that we got when we put out on Instagram about this was, what is your most profitable crop that you grow undercover?
Ranunculus.
Snapdragons.
Oh, well,
Snapdragons are the most profitable per square foot. Easy.
Well, so we run enterprise budgets, and so that calculates like all of your inputs and outputs. So that also calculates like how long is it in the tray and how many days you water the tray, all your labor hours. Basically, you go through and calculate all those steps, which takes a lot of work. So we've mainly done it for the greenhouse crops. But so snapdragons are the highest profit per square foot. But as far as like what does our business grow the most of as far as profitability, it would be ranunculus, because we grow more of that. Like snaps, are high profit per square foot, but we only plant so many beds because we know we can sell as much ranunculus as we can plant. And so that's the focus. So it goes from ranunculus in the spring to Lizzie's in the summer.
Which are also profitable.
Yeah, which is also would probably be number two in the greenhouse. As far as,
so when you're I had this question from a local grower here the other week or so ago. Like, they were wanting to grow snapdragons, and the market is saturated with here actually a lot of Canadian product, believe it or not. Yeah. And so he's kind of like, should I grow them? Should I not grow them? What should I grow? Da, 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 da. So I don't mind sharing what I told him, but I'm curious how you approach that.
I would say
the Canadian snapdragons are amazing though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of hard to compete. I mean, the Canadian ranunculus is pretty nice too. Like, they're knocking it out of the park up there, and you can't really compete with that. So you almost have to find a niche market.
For us, I would say the snaps are something like that support our ranunculus. Like, I wouldn't grow just snaps, but like if for
It's
example,
part of the mix.
like one of our grower mentors, they said, like, you can go to a florist with one item and they'll buy 5 of that one item. You can go to a florist with 10 items and they'll buy 5 of each item. Like, it's much more worth your trip. So like snapdragons are just kind of like the support team. So that's not just ranunculus that we're like coming to somebody's door with in the spring.
Sure.
Or grow the specialty varieties, like the standard snaps are ones like, there's specific ones that, you see all the time, but maybe you grow the chantillies or you grow colors. So like we try to grow like some of the fancy, like coral color, apricot or whatever, just colors that are not in the standard wholesaler's cooler, so that you're not like trying to compete with that maybe.
Because snapdragons are also cheap at the wholesaler. I mean, my florist will buy them when they're on sale and he's getting them for like $5 a bunch or something like that sometimes, and so you can't compete with that.
Right. Well, in my situation, the Canadian ones are more expensive depending on what grade you get too. But that's exactly what I recommended too, was to try. I said, because from a wholesale standpoint, we want to have, just like you described, we're not trying to replace product as much as we're trying to add. And nobody is growing on any scale all these amazing novelty colors, special like the Chantilly lace, all of those. You're not getting that in a wholesale environment. And I said, if you can focus to that, that would excite me, because then I can add to our mix. It's and you don't have any competition. There's no one else growing that we can help distribute. So that's the reason why I was like, oh, let's do that. And they were excited and I was excited and everyone's excited, because we can all make money with that, right? But everybody wants to grow the exact same whatever it is. It doesn't matter. That's when it gets kind of challenging. So but no, I'm glad to hear that. I'm also glad, with ranunculus, how soon do you start harvesting ranunculus, being undercover and heated? You said your season starts in April. I'm surprised it doesn't start a little bit earlier.
So in the heated house, the ranunculus starts in March. Our goal is to hit right after Valentine's Day. So we have tried before to hit Valentine's Day, and what's hard about it is that we go through Thanksgiving. So there's not enough time to flip the beds, because it's cloudy and gray and the days are short or whatever. So there just isn't enough growing time to get stuff in then and have it ready by Valentine's Day. So we chose Thanksgiving over Valentine's Day, basically, as far as greenhouse space goes.
And it's easier to end the season with continuing on than to have something new at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
Like for Valentine's Day. And here in Ohio, the weather really shifts March 1st. And so there's been a lot of Valentine's Day weeks where we've gotten, 6 inches of snow and it's cold. And I don't want to be delivering and doing that at that time of the year. I'd rather be doing it on Thanksgiving when it's maybe sleeting a little bit or something, so it's that, and
it's always hard to promise, at the beginning of a crop, I don't promise anything until it's actually blooming.
That's a good point.
And so I've learned, especially for holidays. So it's florists want to place their orders in December and know what you're going to have for Valentine's Day. And it just doesn't work that way with winter growing stuff. So especially we're pretty cloudy here. So Columbus is the 4th cloudiest city or something. So we're pretty, we're right under there, Portland and Seattle and Cleveland, Buffalo, and so our winter growing things grow slow sometimes because we don't have sun. This winter was pretty sunny, and so we got lucky, and stuff kind of came on early, but I'd rather not overpromise for a holiday too. So, and that's one of our mentors that we learned from, that was their method with the florist too, was to come in, end of February, beginning of March. And so we kind of started with that timing by learning from them about growing in greenhouses. And so that sort of has worked out usually. And then by fall, like we've tried to have stuff later than Thanksgiving. We have like flowering cabbage and branches and willows and stuff like that. But as far as like having flowering blooms, and it's just, yeah, we're tired. Things need light and like more heat than what we want to give them. And so that's why we kind of, it's like Thanksgiving ends the fresh cuts, and then we're on to just kind of like sticks and berries um
Dried stuff.
and dried stuff, yeah, for the
I
winter.
imagine you save a lot of money in fuel too, because you're not having the pressure of having to pour all that money, to heat those houses to try to hit Valentine's Day during some of the coldest times of the year. If you're
Well, it's
if
still
you're
heating.
well,
Yeah,
yeah, but I'm just
yeah,
saying,
but
like,
they're
not
only
as
to like 50, 40 or 50, we're not heating them to 65 trying to like
right.
get those blooms
Like-
warm. Yeah.
Like you said, it's not the pressure of trying to hit a certain date, right? I mean, it's hard enough to hit Easter and Mother's Day. Adding Valentine's Day onto that,
Yeah.
it's just And then also Valentine's Day is a lot of red roses and stuff like that. Ranunculus would be nice, and people would definitely use it. But it's a lot of red roses. I'm sure that most florists, that's what people are asking for is red and white roses. So
But I will say this, with non-traditional florists that try to not go down that path, ranunculus is actually the number one flower
Yeah.
at Valentine's Day. But I mean, it's okay though. I mean, you don't have to be there. You still have all those holidays coming. It's not necessarily worth the headache, because you're right, because all it takes is one thing and you've missed the day, and then all that, and then the day after, no one is as excited about it. So
and
nobody
Easter,
for us, nobody wants red in the spring. None of our florists like red in the spring. So like the year that we tried to hit Valentine's Day, it was like we didn't hit it, and then we had like half a bed of red ranunculus that nobody wanted to buy after Valentine's Day. So they wanted all the soft pastel-y colors. So that's where we're like, well, maybe that just like confirmed that we're not going to try again. But for us, Easter and Mother's Day are biggest. Easter is, we're on to like, full beds of ranunculus are blooming at that point. And then for Mother's Day, in the unheated tunnels, we can have ranunculus and anemones blooming. So the volume is much higher for Mother's Day. And so, every year we sell everything that we can cut for Mother's Day,
Sure.
we keep adding greenhouses. So
and Easter's huge too. I mean,
Easter really kicks off the season, and then Mother's Day. Yeah.
Don't underestimate Easter as a floral holiday. I think Easter's huge. And I take Easter all day. I can have stock, for Easter. Stock's one of my favorite crops to grow, just because it's beautiful. I mean, we're not gonna, they all are. It smells good, but stock's really rewarding when you get a nice full bed of stock.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny because when I got in the business, in the wholesale end of it, it was 91, and Easter wasn't as big of a holiday as it has been the last 10 years. And it's kind of an exciting renaissance of that whole situation that I think is really awesome. Okay, so another one of the questions, a lot of times, one of the questions that we received was just talking about recouping the investment. Because when you go to put a high tunnel up or a greenhouse up, obviously that's a sizable investment, depending on heating or not heating and all those things, and whatever else. Maybe the land you have needs some grading. I mean, who knows what all those things are. So, I can see where that's a real, at least in someone's mind, an obstacle of making that jump. So any ideas of like numbers of kind of how long does it take to kind of break even or turn a profit?
Well, I think
so
sorry.
Go ahead.
We talk about this in our like greenhouse class, kind of like selecting the kind of greenhouse that works for you. But I think that's why we would usually suggest for somebody to start with an unheated structure. Like you don't need to go into like heated space right away. And the heated space that we have, they were unheated to begin with, and then we just like added utilities. So you don't have to jump in full force right away. You can start with an unheated structure, learn a little bit about growing under cover as far as like water management and pest management and stuff like that before you start like, you know, before you put all your utilities out there and add heat and electric and, you know, kind of go for that next step if you're weary about it. But I think the sooner you can jump in, the better.
Yeah, she said everything I was going to say.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. Somebody's got to say it. I would say though, you know, I mean, it's going to take you a little bit longer to pay off your first greenhouse than it is going to pay off, or high tunnel, than it is going to take to pay off your third high tunnel, because the learning curve. I mean, you're going to learn a lot over the first 1 or 2 high tunnels greenhouses, but by the time you're putting up your third, you kind of know what you're doing. And so I would say now we're paying off a structure, and you know,
it's unheated, I'd say probably the first year it pays itself.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's hard. Then you got to throw in the labor to harvest all the flowers that are coming out of it and stuff like that. But I think you can pay it off within a year or two. It's paid off, and then you're just rocking product out of it after that. You know,
as long as you know you're growing the most profitable crops too. Like, we're not putting up greenhouses and planting sunflowers and zinnias in there. Like, that's not the objective. You know, it's like with the season extension stuff with ranunculus, anemones, stalks, snaps. In the summer, lizzies, yes, and geraniums. Like, and then you go in the fall with mums and like flowering cabbage and stuff, and then back with snaps again in the fall. So like figuring out that rotation of, like, we know we could put ranunculus in the fall, it comes out in the spring, that turns into a lisianthus bed or a eucalyptus bed or dusty miller or whatever in the summer. And then that takes us through, or it's a bed that gets flipped pretty quick, like stock or snaps, and those are followed behind like the fall crops, the mums and the flowering cabbage that are going to be in for a long time until you harvest them in the fall. So most of our beds get 2 turns in them in a season, and that I think helps also. So
we have been able to do 3 before, but at this point it's just our plan is 2. But you know, there's certain crops, ranunculus, dusty, lisianthus, anemones, that I wouldn't be able to grow outside. And I think that most people around the country would struggle to grow them outside. You might have a good year or 2 every once in a while, but Lizzie's, you know, you get a big rainstorm at the wrong time, your Lizzie crop is done. And so how much money then are you losing if you have 150 feet of Lizzie's outside that get destroyed at the wrong time?
Like same thing with lilies. We used to grow lilies outside in the ground, and we would get botrytis all the time because it would rain, you know, when they were just about to bloom, so the plants were really dense. And so we decided it was more worth it to grow the lilies inside. So
that adds to how fast you pay it off too, based on losing money on one end, you know, of not being able to protect it. You know, and so I think starting with a high tunnel makes sense. Adding gas or, you know, heat and electric, depending on utilities, you know, that's maybe another $10,000-$15,000 on to the cost of the structure. But your ranunculus is going to be a lot better coming out of a heated structure, even minimally heated, you know, 40 degrees. I'm kind of obsessive about controlling humidity in the houses. So I do run my houses warmer.
Because we used to do 40, but
we used
then
to do 30. We used to do 34.
Yeah, like basically just enough to keep stuff alive. But then we were just having disease issues because we are so cloudy. So basically the plants like weren't transpiring at all, and so it was just like stagnant air in there, and it was getting we were having issues with botrytis and
ventilation and heat. That eliminates humidity. So I do run them higher, but you can run your houses cooler. And then vent them during the day to let that moisture out.
So we've learned a lot about greenhouse management the hard way, you know, by like losing whole crops and then having Ohio State come out and talk to us about what we can do differently, you know. And so that's like why we like taught the class, because we were like, other people should like learn from this, so that way they don't have to go through all of that. Like they don't have to lose 3 whole beds of stock to like learn about downy mildew.
They don't have to lose their hair.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel you on that one. Well, well, I'm glad you said that, and of course, that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you guys on is because number one, you have so much experience in this category, and a lot of people, they gradually get into flower growing, and the kinds of infrastructure investments you've made are sometimes this huge scary thing. And I feel like the course that you taught probably shortens that learning curve and increases the likelihood of being more profitable quicker, and probably answers a lot of questions. So I'm here talking about your course, but and so for everybody, they have a great course that is through Lisa Ziegler, with the Gardener's Workshop. And so go ahead and just tell us about your course, because I want to, for people who don't even know about it, I feel like it's one of those opportunities.
So we taught the class last winter, was our first go of it. So the idea is, now the class exists, we'll sell it each year. So at 6 weeks, you get live Q&A session with us, with all the students each week as we like transition into the following week. And then there's an alumni Facebook group. So you'll have access to us, like answering you questions, and you have access to it forever. So it's like, there's stuff in there for beginners, and there's stuff in there for advanced growers too. So you would be able to rewatch it and maybe retain different things. I know for us, we used to do that. We'd go to the ASCFG conferences and record it with a voice recorder, so that way we could re-listen to it and pick up on other things later. So
I have a voice recording, not anymore, but I used to listen to Frank Arnowski, which I listened to your podcast with him. But I have just hit one of his presentations that I recorded.
That we listened to for many years when we were starting.
I thought I was being creative. I thought I was came up with something new by recording these presentations, but I probably should ask him. But we'll cover like land prep and different types of structures, and kind of sourcing those structures, and what it means to be a greenhouse versus a high tunnel.
Crop selection,
heavy into ventilation and pests and diseases, seed starting.
So it's all stuff that we've learned, like I said, learned the hard way. And so that's why it was kind of like, if other people can learn from our mistakes and start from there, then at least having access to like the resource all in one place. Because I feel like there's information out there about like horticulturally growing, plugs and liners and stuff like that, or veggies in the ground, but there's like not a lot of information. And even when we started working with Ohio State at first, they were like, what we do is so unusual, like planting for cut flowers directly in the ground is like not something that they're
it's still different.
There's like they like to bring their students out to like show them the farm, just because it's like not what they like study in school. So
she likes to say that they come out and tell us about how we're bad at raising our children, because they walk through the greenhouses and like point out different things,
and
that
they
we need
nerd
to
out on
replace,
all the pests and diseases that when we have an issue, that's when they like bring the most people, so that we can like have the most minds thinking about it. But then they also get to like nerd out on how bad the mildew is, or whatever the issue is that we're dealing with. So and so all of those things, like that's where we steam our soil. So like that came from trying to have a more sustainable way of like dealing with diseases in the soil that we didn't want to fumigate. And Ohio State said to like replace all the soil in the greenhouse, and we were like, that's not really an option. So we knew that there had to be things as far as like management that we could be doing differently. And so it's a lot of work, all these greenhouses. I think people assume like, oh, the winter is like when farmers can like go on vacation, and it's like, well, not when you have this many greenhouses, because if a snowstorm is coming, somebody has to be here to scrape the snow off, or turn the heat up, or make sure if it's windy that the like sides are down, if it's sunny, like things like that. Those are all things that we've learned from having a greenhouse collapse under the weight of snow, or having like, you know, winds come and like pick up part because we left one side open and the other side closed. And
we're pot committed at this point to staying home December, January, and February.
Yeah, so if we do get away, it's usually in March. Yeah, right before the season starts. Yeah,
that's crazy.
Less chance of snow.
So I guess because of this, and I mean, like you said, Steve, like you're getting ready to gear up to your busy time with your employees and things. Do you pretty much are you able to carry them year round, or do you have like some that are more seasonal and some that, you know, you just maybe they just change hats and they start doing different things?
Yeah, so we have 4 guys that are on the H2A work visa that are here from March through November. Next year, we're going to do at least 7 H2A work visas. And so those people will be here seasonally, but then the same people will return every year, barring any setback with government issues. And then so,
which has been a great way for us to have
seasonal
return employees.
Seasonal return employees doesn't really exist outside of, for us, having this work visa. And so that is a huge burden off that's my crew, that's my field crew. So that's who I'm working with March through November, and kind of working with, and it's nice because they come back. So, you know, right now we're currently digging dahlias. Well, 2 of these guys have dug dahlias 4 years now, and the other 2 have dug dahlias 3 years. So it's we all have learned the same thing the last 4 years, that we're all at the same stage. And so,
how many dahlias do you guys grow?
This year we got like 55,000 in the ground, so it's a lot to dig. We got a big project ahead of us. But yeah, so total right now we have 22 people.
So yes, and then so what we do is we don't want to lay people off unless it's just time for them to go. Sometimes, you know, one person every other year maybe just doesn't work out, you know, and it's just time. Sure. And then, but for the most part, we're trying to, for us, it's easier for us to keep people on. And as long as we are having those meetings and talking about what we need to improve on, what they need to improve on, things like that, then the communication is open. And so
I think last year we had 10 people in the winter. Not everybody's full time through the winter, so it just is kind of based on what people need and like what hours we have available. So like we like to be off on Fridays, January and February, because that's kind of our only like time to have an extra day. I like to be off on Fridays. So, you know, in years past, like our employees have just been 4 days, but last year we realized we needed people to be here on Fridays. Like, you know, shipments still show up, like, you know, all your plugs come on a Friday when nobody's here. And then it's like, we're the ones who have to like, have to do it, even though it's supposed to be our day off. So this year people will be here some people will be here 5 days a week, but we try to like do, you know, we pay time and a half for overtime. And so the objective is like, you know, if you're working overtime in the summer, that you kind of have an understanding that like you may go down to 3 or 4 days in the winter, but like you're kind of setting yourself up. So we haven't like had anybody on salary yet, just because the people that we've had have kind of like are used to that cycle. I don't know. And
but if our employees need 5 days at this point in the winter, then we're going to make sure that we give that to them. And so
that they don't have to get a second job.
Yeah.
Because it used to be we'd go down to like 2 or 3 days and then they get another part-time job, and which means they're working there 2 or 3 days, which means they're working 6 days a week and they're not really resting in the winter. So like
the last thing I want is for one of my employees to have to go get another job to compensate. And so what we did was we started selling dahlia tubers, and we started growing a lot of dahlias so that we could keep them busy in the winter dividing tubers. And so our dahlias go on sale the exact same time that our class opens, the exact same day our class opens this year.
Because you don't have enough going on.
Yeah.
It was not on purpose, but it just happened.
But our dahlias go on sale in November. We will do 70% of our dahlia sales in that first week. And so what the goal for us, the sole goal for us, is to provide enough sales that we can sustain employees December, January, and February, and then March we're going to have flowers again. And so again, going back to what I was talking about earlier, was creating these enterprises that can help alleviate some of the stress of payroll or cash flow, right? It's creating these enterprises that can keep people employed year round.
And to take the stress off of summer field growing too. Like you can only, like for us, it was like you can only grow so many zinnias, you know, and it's like
Right.
We're growing as much field stuff as we ever have. We've not cut back.
Well, the thing about it
the
is,
goal this year is that's what we were like, we need to, if we're going to increase dahlias at all, we want to be able to rotate, which means other things need to be cut so that there's more room in the field for dahlias. So
sure.
some of those decisions will be made this year. Yeah.
Well, I know that, you're trying to keep people employed and you're trying, and I can appreciate that. But for you as business owners, there's a benefit to the continuity of having trained people
Yes.
be there 12 months a year. And
Yeah.
that is a huge, and I know sometimes people, I feel like, get a little short-sighted and they think, well, I'm not cutting, I can't do this. And so you let them go. And of course they've got mortgages to pay or, rent to pay, and they have to find another job. And so that sometimes ends up, I think, backfiring, because then you end up having to retrain people. It's maybe easier just to figure out a way to grow your business to that level where you need them 12 months a year.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, there's the nursery that we rent from, he has a lot of employees. And when we first started renting from him, I said, do you ever lay people off in the winter? Because at that point I needed people in the winter. I was like, do you ever lay people off in the winter? He's like, I don't lay people off. I don't want, same idea as what I've been saying, is like, I don't want to lay people off and have to bring people on. It's just, I'd rather if I got a good employee, I'm going to work my butt off to make sure that I can keep them if they want to stay, because I want them to stay for sure.
Right.
There's not many people that we end up laying off.
Most people kind of weed themselves out. Like you can tell when somebody's ready. We've learned a lot about people management, and Steve has a pretty good sense of like, oh, I can feel this person like disconnecting. Like, I think that they'll be ready soon. And he can identify it before they even can, most of the time. So you learn. Yeah. And that's okay. We also we have learned through that, at first when you have people leave, it's like, it's hard not to take it personal, and you've like invested all that time in them. Right. And it's hard not to like get hardened a little bit, where you're like, oh, I gave so much of myself to them. But it's like, that's your job as the boss, is to like give as much of yourself to them as you can. And so some people will leave here, leave working here, and they'll be a part of our lives forever, and like we'll come back with their kids and farm, and then there'll be some people that leave working here and we'll never like see again, and that's okay too. Like we say that when you work here, you find out whether or not you want to farm, because it is a production farm. And so we're not just like, galloping through the fields and barefoot or whatever. Like that's not what's happening here. And so there are some people who come and they're like, wow, this was, we're cranking through a lot of volume and it's a lot of processing and stuff, and they decide that's not what they want to do. And it's like, that's fine too. You learned that about yourself, and you learned skills that then you can take to like your next job. You learn how to like push yourself, I think that's what I like about farming. And I think is what is like, I guess, addicting about it, is that you learn what you're capable of, and every year you're like, push yourself harder, or yeah, like this year digging this many dahlias, we were just, and it's like once you accomplish like a task that is that challenging, or where you've had to like, really like dig deep, then it's like something you can be proud of, and you kind of take that on to the next step, and that's what kind of like continues to drive you and
continue to grow. We continue to grow and strengthen ourselves, maybe not physically all the time, but strengthen ourselves in other ways. I like to try and do better than I did yesterday the next day,
Right.
and what's awesome about farming is it's so seasonal. It's
you get to start over.
You start over. So it's like a season, it's like a sport, where you only have one opportunity to plant dahlias a year. I mean, sure, that could be within a couple weeks or a month, but you got one planting time of dahlias per year for maybe 30 or 40 years. And so my goal is to every year just improve upon that and take what I learned the last year and realize how the whole growing season went. And then we all get together and we have a meeting. How can we make this better? How can we improve the whole dividing dahlia process? Like, what went well, what didn't go well, and how can we make that go even better than we could expect? And I think for any employee who's worked here, whether they left here on a good note or a bad note, if they've been here for over a year, can say every year we improve that. Planting tulips every year. The first year we planted tulips, we planted 5% of what we plant now, and it was 10 times harder than it is now, and so that's what I really enjoy is learning something from the previous year and being able to like make it better. And same thing with our team. Our whole team, I feel like gets better and better and better every year. And that's because of us training. That's because of the other employees training. That's because of the culture. Our team is better every single year. That it blows my mind that it blows my mind sometimes that what our team was able to do this year, harvesting all 55,000 dahlias a week, how well they did that. And 2 years ago, my mind was blown with what the crew was able to do, so that's really exciting for me.
Just keep expanding the possibilities.
Yeah.
Well,
We're pretty convinced today. I'm pretty amped up. We started digging dahlias today. I got a new digger. I had 2 diggers going. Everything was just high energy. So I'm pretty.
He came in pumped.
I told her. I was like, I'm pretty amped.
That's awesome. I love that. That's a great attitude. And it's I mean, just having new equipment, that sometimes is by itself exciting. So to make it easier.
At the same time. Yeah. It's exciting. Yeah. It's exciting, but it's frustrating at times too.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, I always like to ask an advice question, and you guys, of course, have shared a ton. I'm wondering if there's anything in particular that you want to make sure, like either new flower farmers or seasoned flower farmers, like just what would you like, or it could even be for florists. What is it you'd like to just make sure you leave as a parting thought?
Well, I would say if you have been thinking about growing flowers, that the demand is there, and so do your research as far as market research and figure out what people are charging. Don't make it a race to the bottom. Like, we're all out here working hard, so you shouldn't be selling them for like the cheapest on the block is not the objective. But yeah, I think that the demand is there. I think as far as florists go, weddings, we saw with the shortages happening this year, if brides can be a little more flexible with their vision and you're selling them more of a color palette during a specific time of year, we were there for a lot of florists in these flower emergencies that have happened in the past month. And so like, we hope that opened their eyes to the possibilities with local flowers. And I hope that they continue to sell their weddings in that way so that they can continue to support more growers. So, you know, if you're a grower, you're already growing, you're thinking about selling to florists, like start, you know, doing your research and contacting florists and figuring out what bunch sizes are. You can sign up with a wholesaler and be on their list and see, you know, kind of what some of the standards are, or order some flowers in yourself and like, you know, do some market research to figure out what a bunch size looks like and what flowers get stripped or if they get a special wrap and things like that. But I think we can all work together to help like grow the domestic flower industry. Like, I think the demand is there. I think the consumer awareness is happening. So yeah, I'm excited to see like what happens next. You know, I think that there's a lot of things that are changing. So did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say I had a lot of time to think about that while you were talking. Learn what you are good at doing and what you really enjoy doing. Try and figure that out and be willing for that to change, you know, a lot. It changes, it evolves, and you know, I think as for me, I would say if you're asking me what my biggest assets are, I would say delegating and being flexible, like being able to like change. And so adaptability. Yeah, not flex. I'm pretty flexible, but I should stretch more, but I'm not super flexible.
Adaptability.
So adaptability. But you know, being willing to adapt, you know, even with sales or things like that, but adapt what you have to do. And
I mean, I think everybody learned that a little bit about themselves last year, right? So like that's something I think. Yeah.
No, I can assure you that is not the case. Some people did, but
I mean,
we don't get out much.
I just feel like if you're a business owner or you're creative, you know, that there were definitely changes that happened in life that you learn to pivot towards or away from. I don't know, based on what you're
but I just going, you know, following what you're good at and what you enjoy doing, and then letting that evolve into what it needs to, you know.
And not being afraid to make mistakes. I think that's something that, you know, we always say farming keeps you humble, because it's like as soon as you think you have it all figured out, something else happens. There's another pest or some weather event that you have no control over, you know. So so yeah, just staying in that mindset of like, when you fail, turning it into like, this is what I know that I can do better next time. But don't be afraid to get out there. I think the demand is happening, so now's the time.
I think a lot of people do get held back getting into farming, flower farming. I think they kind of get held back, and lucky for us, we're 21 and 24, so there wasn't a lot of like holding me back, you know, so it was pretty easy to jump in.
We were young and naive.
And obsessive.
Obsessive
as well.
So well, guys, thank you so much for this interview and this time, and thank you for being on the Flower Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
It was so fun. Sorry if we talked too much.